I would like to go over some of the features of the Humble framework. This is basically high level. We're not really going to dive into much coding or whatever. That's going to be for the next video where we're going to actually start building things. I just kind of want to go over how it's set up, some of the really cool things that it can do, and some of the philosophy behind it. But let me first go over some of the basic features of the Humble framework. Humble is a model view controller approach, so we have clear separation of concerns. It's modular, so you code goes into individual modules, and that allows you to keep your code pretty well segregated. Segregation in life is not a good thing, but it's a great thing in code. Controllers are XML files that handle allocation, validation, and routing. Okay, they're really they're the superpower of this framework. And out of the box, it supports 11 different server-side rendering engines such as Smarty and Twig and Blade, Tiny but Strong, Latte, etc., Mustache. So you know in your project you can use just one server-side rendering engine, or you can use multiple. I tend to go between Smarty and Twig quite often. I'm leaning more towards Twig these days. When you want to integrate with things like Google API or online things, it's very easy to do so. You don't do it in code. You basically describe the endpoint you want to reach with YAML files, and then a virtual function is created that allows you to hit that. We'll show you later. And Humble has something called the Paradigm Engine. It basically handles events. You can see it there to the right. It is a graphical workflow editor. You can set up workflows to respond to certain events. These can be file events, like a file arrives in a folder, time of day, a user does something, like to click on something, or form submission, or whatever. And it makes it really easy to set up as an ESB, an enterprise service bus, which you can then use for the workflow editor to do the orchestration and choreography and stuff. There is robust logging, and the administration section is a superpower in and of itself. I'll have a video to go over what is going on there and why it is a set of tools that are really powerful, even if you're thinking about using it for some other purpose. Really easy development. It is so easy to build things. I just came off a very large enterprise project that was using Humble, and most of the stuff I did was XML and JavaScript. I very rarely had to write PHP. Same with SQL, because so much of it is done automatically. Humble leans heavy into magic. And one of the features of the Humble is that it has a polyglot ORM, polyglot persistent ORM. We can talk about that a little bit soon. It basically does a behind the scenes join of a MySQL table with a Mongo collection. And so at any point in time, you can save anything, anywhere, anytime, any data, hierarchical or tabular, right next to each other, and you retrieve them back, and you don't have to keep going in and adding new fields to a schema. If it's not on the MySQL side, it'll put it into the collection. If a field isn't on the MySQL side, it'll put that field into the collection, and then you can retrieve it. So it's very, very flexible. Routing. A route in Humble is at least 3 parts. The first part is the namespace, and that is pointing to the module that has the controller in it and the view. So my case, if the namespace was Acme, it would look for the Acme module, then whatever name of the controller, like user, find the user controller, and then the view is the third part. But we can also support more than just 3 segments. Like this is a case where you're passing parameters on the URI. So this is like set up for an API. So the version 1 of the API, order list, order 104, item 5, if you want to get information on it, you could do that. So you have at least 3 segments to identify a route. And the third part of this is where the route's going to be handled. handled. Like in this case, it's just arguments are being passed. So v1 ordered list would be where the logic was that would handle all the rest of this. And additionally, by default, Humble actually protects all your routes that require authentication. If you don't want that route to be, or require authentication, if you want to make it public, you have to go to the public routes.json and enter that route there. Otherwise, Humble will direct you to the login page to authenticate before you can have access to those routes. Modules. Module is a collection of classes, controllers, views, database, abstraction objects, and configuration, as well as any web elements like JavaScript, CSS, and images. And again, you reference the modules, no matter what you're referencing, whether it's the PHP class or JavaScript or whatever, you have to use the namespace to get you to the module. And then there are corresponding folders in that module that have everything else in it. Every application has a main module, and that is the first module you create, and it is in your hierarchy path. Normally we name, just as a convention, you don't have to do that, but the namespace is the same as module name, but the module name is capitalized. And secondary modules may make references to the main module, that's fine, but you should not try to access, one secondary module should not be going over into another module's structure and referencing things in there. That's basically, it breaks down the idea of separation of concerns and segregation of your code. So don't create dependencies like that. Controllers are XML files that compile to PHP programs behind the scenes. You don't have to do it. Whenever a controller is changed, the timestamp on the file changes, and the system picks it up and automatically recompiles them. A lot of stuff is going on in here. Controller has one or more actions, and when we go over the controllers, we're going to have 3 different videos on basically introduction to controllers, basic setup, intermediate, and then when you then show you where we can do some really advanced things with the controllers. Like in this case, on the left-hand side, you can see up here the controller. The name is used. This is a user controller, and it's going to use Twig as the templating engine. You can replace that with any of the other ones. Controllers handle routing, validation, and allocation. Object allocation here, it's allocating a model object that's business logic, and then here it's actually taking the user and calling the login method. If the login succeeds, you get routed to the home page. Otherwise, you get redirect back. So you can do a lot of things. There's different conditional things. There are if statements, switch statements, primitive looping, even if you need to do that. So it's very flexible, and I find myself often being able to do any task given with just changing, just creating actions with XML, and I really don't need to write PHP at all. A module can have many controllers, and controllers can have an unlimited number of actions. Okay. So the ORM at the core of the system is not trying to replace SQL. So essentially, you can do a lot of really basic stuff. Once you get to the point where you're doing a lot of joins and stuff, then it's better if you just drop back 15 and go back to using SQL. The syntax is very, very forgiving, and when we go into our entity video, you'll see. But yeah, Polyglot, it's a polyglot persistence ORM, one of the few around, and it uses 2 persistence mechanisms. One, MySQL, which is relational, and then of course hierarchical Mongo, to get the best of both worlds. Okay, and this allows you to store anything, anywhere, at any time, because if it's not on the MySQL schema, it will stick it into similarly named collection on MongoDB, which can, of course, handle anything. So a lot of really cool stuff happens there. And when I talk about smart endpoints, this is an example of setting up a smart endpoint. This is for USPS, verify address and zip code lookup, and there's a city-state lookup. You can see here that this is the virtual function name, zip code lookup. When you call that virtual function, it's going to hit this URL. There are no API keys here. There is a template, and the fields of that template are listed down here. So it's going to go. This is a resource. So it knows that there's a zip code lookup, a file called zip code lookup. That's a resource, and it's going to read that in, and basically it's an XML statement. We're not going to pass these variables. We're going to use these variables to populate the XML template, and then we're going to send that with the zip code lookup. And the ID of one is basically telling you how many we're looking up. This is an atomic lookup. We're just going to look up one. We're going to give one address and then get the zip code for that back. User ID. This is actually a secret. That's SM is a secret manager. So we have a secret. The key is USPS user ID, and that's in our secrets manager. So that's going to retrieve that from the secret manager and plug that in there. Okay. We support REST, SOAP, and a ton of other. I mean, it's extremely flexible. So integration, basically you read the API, then you fill out the YAML file, and it works extremely well. Okay. And at the heart of Humble is this. It's called Paradigm Event Engine, and you're looking at an actual one that's out there. This is actually the login workflow that when you log into Humble, you go through. Won't really go into all this. There's a lot to it. Basically, this is a workflow that's responding to an event. The event in this case is, you can barely see it there, is a login attempt. And that's not the only thing you can respond to. Like, you can respond to it. The triggers up here are time, like a time of day. Actor is when somebody does something, like they click on a button in a form, submit a form, whatever. Service, this is for creating an ESB, Enterprise Service Bus. A webhook, well, that's a reverse API. General action, like the login attempt is a general action. And then file, you can set a watch on a directory, and if a file arrives in a folder, you can then trigger a workflow. So when somebody does a login attempt, they're going to drop into this workflow, and so they're going to end up somewhere in here. Like I said, you can set the events can be user-inspired actions. Somebody did something, or they can be system-related events. So this is a time you're going to set something to run every 30 minutes, starting 8 a.m. on a certain day. And we do not use cron or the scheduler task. We have an actual program that runs that takes care of it. It's called Cadence. It runs every 5 seconds and looks to see if it needs to do something. Here's an example of setting a file trigger. So we're looking at this var www files, and when a file comes in with .edi as an extension, it will kick it off, and it will attach that file name to the field name EDI file. And this will trigger on new file and on change file. Okay, and this over here is an example of setting up a web service. In this case, an authentication web service. So they're going to send in their user ID and an auth token, and we're going to do a lookup. But we created this dynamic URI called ESB/authentication, and when they authenticate, they're going to get a session ID back that they're going to then use to pass with any future requests. So, and how does this work? Well, this is an example of an actual code. So back in when we looked at the file here, you can see here that the third one down, it says are temps greater than 3. Well, that I'll show you the code there in a second here. And what we do, we use annotations. There is an @workflow annotation that identifies how you're going to use this method. So this method is going to show up under decisions when you're building your workflow. So it'll get that diamond box, and it does have a configuration. So on this configuration page here, there is a text box that allows you to set how many tries are you allowed. Are you allowed 3, 4, 5, whatever. So the Paradigm Engine basically creates a common bus between these methods. These methods are not meant to be called outside of a workflow. These methods are going to receive an event just like you would in JavaScript, and it's going to have the information on there and a couple of methods that they can call. In fact, there's only 3 methods you can call on an event, and that's load, fetch, and update. And we'll go into them later, but you can see, so if you're wondering how your code gets categorized, you use an annotation, and this is an actual example of that here. Also, Humble has a very, very powerful administration section, and it's getting more powerful even. And it centralizes things like your logging, has a unit test harness, your documentation. API Gen and PHP Documenter are part of the Humble framework. I include them in here, and you can choose which one you want to use to document your code. So it's all just a push button stuff here, and then it comes up, and we've got all these different logs, different things going. But yeah, I'll go over this, and you don't ever actually create a class or anything really from scratch by hand. You use there are tools, like you want to create a new controller, you come in here to this plus controller and fill out that form, and it'll create it for you. It does that also so you follow a particular convention so that your code is easier to document. All right, and I'll go over that in its own video. And we also have a powerful command line. So it's extensible. You can add your own commands in there very easily. And, you know, a lot of times things on the administration section are just calling the command line in the background. So, you know, we do that. But yeah, doing this way, you can write scripts that automate some of these tasks or whatever else, or string them together to do multiple actions. But yeah, the command line is definitely a good feature of Humble. And additional things we have, like I said, we have automatic documentation generation. We have something like Swagger. So it's built into it. You can see right here in the service directory, you can actually expand these services here, just the ones on the left here, and then test that service. So you can, you know, do post, put, whatever you want to those, and you can test if they're working. We have a PHP unit-based test harness built in, and you set them up using XML logs, a bunch of the logs, and a lot more. Okay, so that's about it for right now, and so let's go build something.